So my name is Tracy Davids, and I am the Southeast Program Coordinator for Defenders of Wildlife based in Asheville. And I am delighted to welcome you today to our Lunch and Learn webinar series. I help to lead outreach efforts, of which this Lunch and Learn series is a part. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to post them in the chat box. And we'll do our best to answer questions as we go. But we will have a Q&A session at the end of the program, and we'll have a panel, and so you'll be able to ask any questions of our panelists at that time. Before then, we ask that you please keep your mute on and your video off, just to minimize any background noise during the program. A little bit about Lunch and Learns. Our Lunch and Learns is an educational program offered by Defenders Southeast Field Team to help bring our members up to speed on current projects and let you know how you can help. Today, we're going to talk about a program that we've been working on for the past few years, the protection of the Okefenokee Swamp, the largest blackwater wetland in North America, and it is threatened by a proposed titanium mine. At stake is the 440,000 acre ecosystem, 2 rivers, and a wilderness destination that boasts up to 700,000 annual visits. So we're curious to know if you've ever been to the Okefenokee before, and what your general knowledge is of the issue. And so I'm going to launch a poll, and the poll is anonymous. We'd love it if you would just go ahead and use the poll to let us know. I'm going to launch it now. And we have 3 questions. Have you ever visited the Okefenokee? Did you attend our webinar on the Okefenokee this past January? And how familiar are you with our efforts to protect the Okefenokee? So we can gauge a little bit about your knowledge. We've got about 75 participating so far. I'll give it another few moments, see if we can get 100% or close to it. Great. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you so that we all can see. It looks like 36% of you have been to the Okefenokee. That's wonderful. 9% of you attended our webinar about the Okefenokee back in January. Great, so you have some knowledge. 61% are new and eager to learn more. Fabulous. 27% know the basics, and 12% are very knowledgeable. That's wonderful. Thank you all for participating in that poll. So joining me today is another member of the Southeast team who leads our work on the Okefenokee, Christian Hunt. Christian is one of our representatives, and for the past 5 years has been responsible for defending areas in the Southeast with an emphasis on the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. Also joining us are 2 special guests from the Okefenokee Protection Alliance member groups. We'll have Chris Wilson from the National Parks Conservation Association and Charles McMillan from the Georgia Conservancy, who you'll learn a little bit more about later after the film. And before we dim the lights and start the film, I'm going to take just a few minutes to tell you a little bit about Defenders, because even if you're a member or supporter, I think it bears repeating. Let's see if I can launch my PowerPoint to get this started. So our mission at Defenders is to protect all native animals and plants in their natural communities. And our approach to this mission is direct and straightforward. We work on the ground, in the courts, and on Capitol Hill to protect and recover imperiled wildlife across the continent. And our work on the ground is the focus of our field conservation program that includes 6 field offices across the country in Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, California, Rockies and Plains, the Southwest, and here in the Southeast. And there's a really good reason that we work here in the Southeast. And that's because we have mega biological diversity. And with very few protected areas and a growing human population, that biodiversity faces many threats. Within our region, we have 5 focal landscapes that help us set our priorities in order to reach the most significant impacts. The first is the Southern Appalachians, a global hotspot for amphibians and freshwater fish. Next is the Carolina coast, home to the critically endangered red wolf. Then there's the Gulf Coast, home to the Gulf of Mexico whale and biodiversity hotspots like the Mobile-Tensaw River Delta. Then, of course, there's the Florida Panhandle, home to gopher tortoises and sea turtles. And finally, the Greater Everglades, home to Florida panthers, manatees, and lots of other species. And these are the beautiful landscapes on which we work. And now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce the film for today, Sacred Waters, the Okefenokee in Peril, presented by the Okefenokee Protection Alliance with generous funding provided by the National Parks Conservation Association. And of course, following the film, we'll open the floor for any questions, comments, or feedback that you have. Just know that if you want, you can minimize the speaker's screen and so that you can make sure that you have a full screen of the video. So let me toggle over to the film. You'll also want to make sure that you turn your volume up so that you can hear everything well.
The river is a healer, the river is a sage. The river knows no end and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment and it always finds a way. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river calls me over, it's calling out my name. In the day and in the night I hear that river all the same.
It's a different world out here completely. You go 20 minutes down the road, you know, any direction from the swamp, it's a city. You know, you come out here, you can forget all of that stuff. You can see the stars at night. I mean, it's just one of the last great wild places in America.
Heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go. Oh, a river never worries if it's fast or if it's slow. River, take me.
If we are going to keep life on Earth, including human life, we have to protect and hold sacred large tracts of wildness for our own sake, because they provide natural processes that we cannot live without.
You know, it's our responsibility, you know, to stand up and to speak up about it and to let them know, find somewhere else to go. not here, not in our swamp, not in the area that we want to preserve. We want it preserved. We want the animals that God created, that's placed there, to continue to live and enjoy this land.
When I go down to the water, by the water, I feel whole.
Some call it the land of the trembling earth. Some call it fearsome. Some call it sacred. It is the stuff of legend and song, ancient and ever-renewing, mythical, eternal, and fragile. It is the Okefenokee Swamp. The Okefenokee lies deep in the heart of South Georgia. At 438,000 acres, it's the largest blackwater swamp in North America, a designated wetland of international importance, a national natural landmark, and a gold-tier international dark sky park. It is also the mother of two extraordinary rivers, the St. Mary's and the Suwannee. Those rivers have shaped the human history and the ecology of the region. As goes the swamp, so goes its rivers. In short, the Okefenokee Swamp is without comparison. It is singularly rare and profoundly important. Every year, the Okefenokee Swamp records as many as 700,000 visits. They are the wilderness seekers and the dream weavers. They yearn for a place untouched by time, for stars undimmed by mankind's light. For the bellow of gators and the songs of night, they come and they leave forever changed.
And I've been down here quite a few times now in the swamp, and it's amazing how every time I come down here it's different. The sky's different, the water's different, see different wildlife, and it's just a really magical place. And you know, I also think about other places like Yosemite and Yellowstone. You know, it seems like every state has something really special. And when I think about Georgia, I think about the Okefenokee.
Well, one of my memorable experiences I had actually was a young adult. I went out there one summer for a canoeing trip and spent a lot of time on the water, taking a lot of photographs. And I always loved how reflective the surface of the swamp is and how you can see the sky in the water.
So one of the things I think that's interesting about the Okefenokee is that, like, if you're there and you get on sort of one of the observation towers in the park and you look over it, it actually seems more like Africa. It looks like you're looking over the savannah, which is completely wrong, you know, because the savannah is generally pretty dry, low rainfall. But you see this huge expanse of this low shrubby vegetation with some hummocks with trees and with some open water, and you're sitting there thinking, I should see giraffes and elephants running through here. It really is sort of visually a phenomenal place, but you have this wildlife that and this ecosystem that is really quite unique.
At any one given time, I mean, you can walk 30 yards out there, 30 feet out there if you'd like. You're going to see 4 or 5 different species of frogs. You'll see a ton of different fish. You know, speaking of fish, the Okefenokee sunfish. You know, it's an endemic species. It's a little tiny fella. You know, some of the plant life, the Sarracenia minor, the Okefenokee variant, right? It's an endemic species as well. It's a type of carnivorous plant. You know, 36 inches tall. It's a hooded pitcher plant. You know, they're found out here. Only found out here wild. So it's one of those there's something for everybody, you know, from if you're a plant guy to the other side of it, you're a herpetologist, things like that. I mean, there's so much out here to actually be able to see.
In my opinion, wilderness, in order to be true wilderness, needs wildlife. I think people tend to think of swamps and wetlands as these buggy, damp, dank places, but in fact, they're very vibrant and alive. And the Okefenokee supports thousands of species. It's not a barren wasteland, and it provides this incomparable human experience because it's still filled with wildlife. I mean, there are places within this swamp where there are more black bears and alligators and animals than there are people. There are places where people perhaps have never even ventured in the Okefenokee, and there are undoubtedly places in the swamp that still remember the presence of the red wolf, the Florida panther, and those places could still support those animals again.
Beneath those tea-colored waters of the Okefenokee are these layers and layers of peat, which is decaying vegetation. And something that's really cool about the peat is that it offers this window into our past. It has this uninterrupted record of our environmental conditions over 5 millennia, which is hard to even wrap your head around. And so I think another thing that's really interesting about Okefenokee is just getting to go there and be a part of something that's so old, so vast, and so big, and kind of take us out of our day-to-day grind.
The swamp has always been something that I enjoyed since a kid. One of the things that I always looked forward to was going on field trips to the swamp. And in particular, they had a gator there by the name of Oscar. And this gator was it was so huge and so big. And all the kids, we just looked forward to going on those trips, getting on the boats and riding through the swamp and getting a chance to, really see natural history. And it's a blessing to have that in your backyard, so to speak, that we had that in this area. And as a child, you don't know how rich that is. But I understand a lot more now being an adult about how rich that heritage is and what a blessing it has been for us to have the Okefenokee Swamp here. So I've always enjoyed that, and I even live close to the swamp now, so it's always been great having that in our backyard.
I think that the farther you can remove yourself from human construction and the deeper you can allow yourself to ground, then I think that you hear things in the middle of Okefenokee Swamp that you don't hear anywhere else. So all that vast botanical wonder supports lots of fauna as well. There's so few words in the English language that can really describe a place so vast and so beautiful.
Mankind, too, have contributed to the tapestry of the swamp. Its oldest inhabitants were the Native Americans who occupied the area during the late Archaic, woodland, and Mississippian periods of prehistory. As late as the 1700s, the swamp was a significant winter hunting ground for Georgia's indigenous Muskogee people. Native Americans weren't the only ones to seek out the mysterious great beyond of the Okefenokee. Escaped slaves sought safety there, and during the Civil War, deserters banded together on the swamp's islands. The swamp's tales are captivating. Its music reflects the twists and turns of the past, and its legacy is worthy of tribute. It is a land that one celebrates and protects and never risks or cheapens with the bulldozers of destructive greed. It is sacred. The Okefenokee shelters a vast mosaic of pine islands, cypress forests, and blackwater channels, and hosts an incredible array of wildlife. But like the species that call the refuge home, the Okefenokee itself is now endangered, as plans for heavy mineral sand mining come perilously close to its borders. The potential destruction looms over every living thing within and beyond the swamp.
And I think as human beings, we have lost our sense of purpose for what this world was created for. I think we think it was really created for us. And we can do with it as we please, but at the expense of everything else. So if we don't preserve it, then who's gonna do it? It's like we're waiting for God to do it, but he said, but I have given you that to do. That's why I put Adam in the garden. He had a job to do. So it's not for us to just enjoy it, but we're supposed to preserve it and take care of it. So when I think about the river itself and the Okefenokee Swamp and all the things, if you just think about all the animals and all the shrubs and everything out there, that body of water is feeding. It's immense, the purpose that God put in that, and for us to go out to destroy it. Like we have to do better about taking care of, this world. It's like we want to make laws for it, but we don't want to govern ourselves as people. So we think a piece of paper is going to help us protect the world and stop all this global warming and all these things. Like, no, when we start to think about things in the sense that we need to think about them, then we can control these things and take care of these things ourselves. But we have to slow down, appreciate what's here, and realize that we can only destroy it. We can't create it. We can't rebuild it. We can't recreate it, none of these things. So I think it's all about us coming back to our senses as far as for what we are here and what we can do, and then just utilize it for what it's for, which is to go out there, appreciate what God created, and live amongst it.
Unfortunately, even though this is such a special place, it is also at risk. And what we're seeing right now is an Alabama company, an Alabama mining company, trying to get permits so they can construct, phase 1 of an 8,000 acre mine. And it's right next to the swamp. And it's on what's called the Trail Ridge, which is essentially the sand berm that holds the Okefenokee back.
Experts that have reviewed the plans for this proposed mine have said that there's a real concern that mining on Trail Ridge, right adjacent to the Okefenokee Swamp, could have irreparable consequences for the hydrology of Okefenokee, which has cascading effects. If you affect the hydrology, then you're affecting species habitat, you're affecting the fire regime, and you're also affecting places that people just love to visit and appreciate. And so really, if someone wants to go and do something that may affect this public resource that we all enjoy, they need to prove that they're not going to harm it. And right now, we don't have that proof. And so that's why folks are so concerned about Okefenokee right now.
So Trail Ridge is an old barrier island complex from a time when sea level was higher. And it's a very long barrier island that's bisected in several places by rivers running through it, one of which is the St. Mary's. But the formation of Trail Ridge essentially blocked the drainage of several small rivers that flow into the Okefenokee Swamp. And by blocking that drainage, backwatered that area and created the Okefenokee Swamp itself. So Trail Ridge is, geologically not that old, but in terms of soil development, it's old. And, the USGS has done studies of Trail Ridge that look at it, essentially the layering of materials in it. And that layering of materials and how it's set basically create the conditions by which that dam works. And so let's say you just dug out a whole bunch of that from one side to the other and replaced it with sort of loose sand that allowed water to pass through faster. Essentially, you could create a subsurface breach in the dam and allow water to move from west to east much faster. So if you change the hydraulic properties of Trail Ridge, at the worst case, you could essentially lower the water level of the swamp by allowing more groundwater to leave through Trail Ridge.
So the fear is that long-term operations will essentially compromise the Okefenokee's ability to sustain itself. And if that were to occur, it would be catastrophic for the wildlife, such as the alligators and the wading birds that depend on predictable seasonal fluctuations in water levels.
For me, there are just a lot of unknowns. I mean, there's been a lot of research done on the environmental impacts of mining. We know that anytime we alter a natural system, there is a disruption, and it will change the character of the soil and the character of the water in that area. We just don't know to what degree, and there are just a lot of things that we don't know about the subsurface because frankly, we can't see into the subsurface. And so for me, I tend to sort of err on the side of caution, in particular at places like the Okefenokee Swamp, which is a national wildlife refuge. It's a very unique landscape that is home to thousands of species of flora and fauna and enjoyed by people from all over the world.
Twin Pines Minerals is, to be frank, a shrewd operator. They have a pretty large tract of land adjacent to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, and they've deliberately positioned their first mine, what they're calling a demonstration area, about as far away from the Okefenokee as possible while still being on their land. And this was intentional, this was deliberate, because they know that once they receive the first permits for this project, it'll be much easier for them to move increasingly closer to the refuge, at which point their long-term operations are expected to come within 400 feet of the swamp itself. So this is what we call, in the world of conservation, a Trojan horse. Twin Pines right now is trying to mine around 700 acres or so during the first 4 years, but in the long term, they want to mine roughly 8,000 acres, which for perspective is the size of about 6,000 football fields worth of land.
The importance of some of these areas, like as far as the refuge is concerned, this is a refuge, regardless of how many visitors we get a year. This is for the animals that's in the area, I'm going to be here. I work here. I'm going to come in and out of the swamp. I have the potential to go anywhere I want to in the world. I can make a house, I can buy a house, borrow it, do whatever. The guys that live here, the animals that are actually inside of the swamp, they don't have that option, right? So in 1937, when this was proclaimed a national natural landmark, that's what Mr. Roosevelt meant, right? And again in 1974, with the designated as a wilderness area. This area is meant to be protected at all costs, right? According to the legislature and the executive order that Mr. Roosevelt signed.
But now it is all being threatened again. Former Secretary of the Interior Bruce Babbitt fought for the Okefenokee when DuPont threatened to mine in 1997. He stated, "Titanium is a common mineral, while the Okefenokee is a very uncommon swamp. It is a battle everyone had hoped would not arise again." The leadership of Twin Pines Minerals is already associated with discharging mineral tailings into wetlands and air quality violations. Now they have the Okefenokee in their sights, and the stakes could not be higher.
In probably about the 1990s, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, had a campaign about wetlands or wonderlands instead of wastelands. They had a poster about all of, and a big public education campaign about what all the good roles are that wetlands play. Some of those might include flood protection, right? So we've had a lot of rain this year, it so happens, in the southeastern United States, and so that these wetlands along the landscape are holding water in ways that if they weren't there, it would have all shown up in our human developed areas, and we would have experienced deeper flooding than we even did. From a hurricane's perspective, they baffle the energy of storm waves coming in, and they can minimize the impact of hurricanes. They're often referred to as the kidneys of the ecosystem. There's microbes, there's tiny critters that live in the soil, and they make a living in a different way than the organisms do here in a terrestrial upland forest. So they are able to take pollutants that might have made it into the waterways and transform them into other elements that maybe aren't so dangerous. And then, of course, there's the whole wildlife perspective, which is the obvious answer when you go to the swamp, and because you can see these things with your own eyes, both plants and animals. There's unique and rare plants often in these wetlands, and so many animals rely on wetlands for some part of their life cycle. You know, riparian areas, the area along rivers particularly, are used by neotropical migrants more than any other type of habitat on the planet. And the whole reason we have wetlands protection in this country is related to birds.
The Okefenokee isn't just a local, state, or national gem. It's an international treasure of great importance. What is needed is not the defilement of the land and the violation of resources, but the united will to enhance this tremendous asset with a sustainable vision that will benefit not only the swamp itself, but generations to come. Today, the Okefenokee Swamp supports over 750 local jobs and funnels $64 million into local communities per year. It continues to shape the lives of those within its formidable reach, both economically and culturally. It is a gift of immeasurable value.
I think that's very enriching to have that human experience for people to enjoy and immerse themselves in. And frankly, entrusting that experience to the mining industry would be madness. You know, we wouldn't put an industrial mining complex on the edge of one of these world-renowned habitats. We wouldn't put it on the edge of, say, you know, a museum of fine art. So why would we do it on the edge of the largest blackwater wetland remaining in America? We shouldn't. This place is too special. It offers too much for people and wildlife, and we can do so much better.
But right now they're able to mine their starting proposal without any federal oversight, no federal wetland permitting, and there's no requirement for replacing or mitigating the wetlands they're going to destroy. And it's about a third of the property area that's actually covered in depressional wetlands.
The Okefenokee's influence extends far beyond its borders, directly impacting 2 states and many counties. The St. Mary's River is born deep within the swamp and travels over 125 miles to empty its waters into the sea. The Suwannee River makes the 246-mile journey to the Gulf of Mexico. These rare blackwater rivers have shaped the history, culture, and economy of the entire region. If harm befalls the swamp, the rivers too will pay the price.
When we think about the science of wetlands and flood protection and water quality improvement and habitat, is that there's the human element, and lots of people like to visit wetlands. And so there's also an economic benefit to protecting certain areas of wetlands. Folks come just to enjoy nature. You know, some wetlands allow hunting and fishing, and those are income sources for many states. In fact, my colleagues in the wildlife and fishery side get a lot of their research dollars from support from hunters and fishers who are able, you know, whose some of the taxes on ammunition and other such things are earmarked and then have to go back into improving that. So there's definitely an economic benefit to having these wetlands. And if you're not a hunter or a fisher, you know, they're beautiful places to visit. The Okefenokee is a beautiful place to canoe or kayak. Folks, the bird watching industry, you know, brings an enormous economic benefit from wetlands all over the globe. And in some parts of the world, when you talk about wetland conservation, all they're talking about is birds, right? So birds bring a lot, and wetlands attract birds.
Because of its uniqueness and beauty, the Okefenokee is being reviewed as a potential World Heritage Site.
To get onto the World Heritage List, you have to have outstanding universal value. I mean, that is just kind of a breathtaking statement to say about something, and I think it really fits for Okefenokee. Joining the World Heritage List is an honor and an opportunity. It imposes no management restrictions on the property, but rather enhances the drive to protect Okefenokee like the treasure that it is. Joining the World Heritage List can also have a lot of benefits for the surrounding communities, as it draws in visitors and scientists who wish to enjoy and study the amazing ecosystems that Okefenokee has to offer.
Throughout the ages, many have tried to capture the Okefenokee's magic in word, art, and song. In the centuries to come, many more will take up that challenge, but only if we stand guard, only if we protect this particular paradise.
It's almost mythic. It's iconic in the American imagination. But when you think about Okefenokee Swamp, you don't think about icons. But you get out there in the middle of it, and you're in the middle of a mythic, iconic American landscape.
We try to preserve it because I have grandchildren, I have great-grandchildren, and I want them to appreciate, what we have been blessed to have.
I think it's really crucial that we protect these environments now, because when they're gone, it's too late. And I don't want to have that hurt going back to them. I want to go back and be excited and see beauty and wonder in nature and show potentially my kids that beauty and wonder in nature.
The Okefenokee Swamp, a place of mystery and magic, of astonishing diversity, legend, and beauty. And now, once again, it hangs in the balance. It is a beating heart that calls to us all. This time, the threat is Twin Pines. Last time, it was DuPont. Who's next? And why must the battle be fought over and over again? It's time to ensure that this astonishing gift of wilderness will be forever free from harm. To learn more about the Okefenokee, the proposed mining venture, and the Okefenokee Protection Alliance, visit www.protectokefenokee.org. And please submit your comments about the proposed titanium mine to the Georgia Environmental Protection Division at twinpines.comment@dnr.ga.gov. Tell them no and tell them why.
The river is a healer, the river is a sage. The river knows no end and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment and it always finds a way. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river calls me over, it's calling out my name. In the day and in the night I hear that river all the same. It's calling me over, calling out my pain. Oh, a river gathers tears just like a river gathers rain. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go. Oh, a river never worries if it's fast or if it's slow. River, take me to where I need to go. Oh, and I will just relax and let the river flow. Water heal my body, heal my water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water When I go down, down to the water, by the water, I feel whole.
Whew. I don't know about you, but I find that to be a very moving film. And I give great thanks to everybody who made that possible. It's wonderful. I hope that each of you will go and see the Okefenokee for yourselves and tell your friends and family about it. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Christian Hunt, who you saw featured in the film, who's going to talk a little bit about what is happening with the Okefenokee presently and where we are and what you can do to help.
Thanks, Tracy. Hey guys, thank you for joining. My name's Christian. This is obviously an issue that's very near and dear to me and my colleagues, but I just wanted to provide a quick update before jumping into Q&A. For those of you that have been following this campaign over the past few years, you're probably already familiar, but things took an abrupt turn this year. When this process first began, Twin Pines Minerals was subject to state and federal oversight. And that was because the wetlands that they're looking to mine are considered jurisdictional, which is just a fancy way of saying that they're subject to Clean Water Act protections under federal law, and therefore independent review. The impacts of the mine on local communities, the refuge and its wildlife all would have been considered by an environmental impact statement as mandated by federal law, which is just a very robust form of independent analysis. All of that dramatically changed last October following regulatory rollbacks made under the Trump administration. After the Waters of the United States replacement rule was implemented, all federal protections and thus oversight on this property were lost. As a result, Twin Pines now only needs a handful of state permits to break ground on this project. So it was a rather unprecedented loss of federal oversight and protections. And Twin Pines is in the midst of that process right now of trying to attain permits from the state's Environmental Protection Division. Georgia EPD, as it's known, is now accepting comments on these permits and Twin Pines' applications. So you can engage today by simply following this action link here and submitting your comments to EPD, encouraging them to simply reject the permits for this very risky and dangerous project. I also dropped the email address in the chat, and you can use that if you want to submit your own personalized comments as well. So with that said, I want to jump into Q&A and also introduce to you guys our panelists. We're very lucky today to be joined by Chris Watson, who is the Regional Campaign Director for the National Parks Conservation Association, and Charles McMillan of the Georgia Conservancy. He is their Natural Resources Director. Both of them have a lot of expertise. They're very seasoned, and we've been working on this issue together for a long time. So please do drop your comments in the chat box, and we will do our best to answer all of them. And I'll now hand it back to Tracy.
Yeah, we have a number of questions. I'm going to start with this one. Which government agency gave Twin Pines the permit to mine and how long ago?
Christian, if you want me to, this is Charles McMillan. If you want me to, I will take a shot at that since I'm the state person. I'm with Georgia Conservancy out of the Savannah office, and I'm spend a lot of my time. I live on St. Simons a lot of the time. I'm from there, and which is down close to the Okefenokee. No permit has been issued as of yet. there are 5 permits that are required from the State Environmental Protection Division, the most significant of which is the Open Pit Mining Act. There is not an active issued permit yet. It has been submitted, and the EPD, State Environmental Protection Division, has responded a couple of times to get more detailed information, and we're in the 2nd or 3rd round of those comments going back and forth between them. When EPD is satisfied on this round of comments, we expect that there will be a public comment period.
Thank you, Charles. Someone has asked if it is possible to share this film, and it is. Following the webinar within the next couple of days, I will be sending an email out to everybody who registered for this program. It'll include a link to this film. It'll include a link to a recording of this webinar as well, and then the other links for submitting comments. All of that will be included in the follow-up email. Another question from Larry: how will climate change be affecting the Okefenokee?
Chris, you want to tackle that one?
Well, I think, the short answer is we don't know. And so, one of the issues is we don't want to mess up the things that are already there to keep the swamp where it is and to protect it. We do know that there are going to be increasing threats of things like wildfire. Weather patterns can be changing. The first step is to protect what we've got there now. And then, as an entire society, we are struggling towards answers to how to adapt and address climate change. And that conversation is happening at the federal level. There's a lot of things in motion right now legislatively. But the sea level rise is definitely going to be a part of the mix. The swamp is inland from the ocean to a degree that it could or could not be affected by sea level rise, depending on the degree. So I think, this is a big question. And, the first step is to protect the swamp as it is and to increase the protection where we can do that.
The one other thing related to climate is that this is a classic peatland. So there's just a significant amount of carbon that's stored in the swamp itself. Any impacts from adjacent industry, whether the water levels are affected by mining or by climate change in our rainfall patterns, has the potential to release a lot of carbon if we're not careful. So in the background that's playing, we're not sure that that's an issue, but this is a classic peatland of holding partially decomposed organics. That's the whole trembling earth thing about it. It's floating organics that then sink to the bottom of the swamp and create these deep peatlands. So just playing off of some of what Chris mentioned in a different dimension.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Charles and Chris. Tom is wondering if he can show this film to his local canoe club. I think the answer is yes. And we'll get that.
Yes, please do. Please do. There are public links, so you can definitely share it.
Lydia is asking, is there a possibly a sample script or written comments to follow or review when writing our own?
Yeah, you can just, if you click on this action link here, Lydia, there's suggested language in there, and you can definitely lift from that and customize it as you see fit. Yeah. We'll also have our contact info on the final slide. So if you have follow-up questions, you're welcome to reach out to any of us as well.
Yeah, and I can put the link to this in the chat as well.
Also, I would point out that all of our organizations in this conversation today are part of the Okefenokee Protection Alliance. And if you Google Okefenokee Protection Alliance and go to that webpage, there's tons of information that you can use to formulate your own response.
And I just posted in the chat a link to our comment letter that you can use as a form to do your own. Let's see, we have more questions. How can Twin Pines be currently mining without a permit?
They are not mining.
The image you saw of their project. Yeah, the image you saw of their project site was just their staging area, so they're just currently setting up.
Somebody on the film mentioned fishing and hunting as a source of income for the swamp. Is it okay with us to do any hunting in such a sacred area? Seems unacceptable.
They do not hunt within the refuge. There is some fishing outside the wilderness area.
Good to know, Charles. Thank you. Those are all the questions that have come up in the chat. If anybody would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, that would be terrific. Or you can continue to post in the chat box.
Do you have that slide, that other slide, Tracy, that we
I
could
sure
put up?
do. Yes, sir. There you go.
So this slide is taken out of the Georgia State Wildlife Action Plan, and it is a state prioritization of wildlife corridors that the DNR has put forward. And you can see the dark green areas follow the river corridors, essentially, the Satilla and the Altamaha and up the Okefenokee. And the Okefenokee Refuge and 3 national park units and also the Bond Swamp Refuge are part of that network. And so the State Wildlife Action Plan is going to be undergoing a revision process in the next couple of years. And there will be opportunities then for public involvement. And so, you know, the first challenge is to defeat the current mine, but the next challenge is to bolster the permanent protections of the Okefenokee and these other priority areas across the state. So one of the things when the revision of the State Wildlife Action Plan comes around, it will be important for people to weigh in on that process. Demand additional protections for Trail Ridge, which is the area being contested with mining issue, and all these other state priority areas. And so the Wildlife Action Plan is another place in the not too distant future where people will be able to help shift the protection and the management of these lands in a more positive direction.
Thank you, Chris. Is Ducks Unlimited a partner in this effort? Cornell Lab of Ornithology or any bird watching groups?
Of that, I do know that Georgia Audubon has been key with us. I don't think that Ducks Unlimited or Cornell have been in on OPA. Sounds like they may be good prospects for supporting us. We are very pleased with the 40+ organizations that we do have in the Okefenokee Protection Alliance. And as you can see, national groups like that bring a lot, would even make it stronger.
And for anybody listening, if you're connected with a group, an organization, national, state, or otherwise, that you think could or should or might be interested in this issue, urge them to contact the Okefenokee Protection Alliance and see about how they can become more involved. And Ducks Unlimited would be a great partner.
Indeed. Yes, and you can show the film as part of any meeting that you have. I think it'd be a great introduction to the issue. I have a question. What's the single most important thing that we can do as members of the public to help protect the Okefenokee?
Engage, mobilize. I mean, first and foremost, you know, the main step is just commenting to EPD, but beyond that, you know, letters to the editor carry a lot of weight from activists and from people in state and out. I mean, this is a project of national implications at this point. So if you want to go beyond submitting comments, please do follow up with Charles, Chris, and I at our email addresses on the contact info slide, because there are plenty of opportunities for folks to engage to any extent that they wish. So please do follow up with. The more people making grassroots noise, putting on pressure, the better.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add to that. At the moment, the jurisdiction and the decision making is happening at the state level, but there are some efforts underway to get that shifted back to the federal level. We don't know if that will be successful or not. But another thing you can do is to contact your federal elected officials, your senators and congressmen, and let them know that this is a national issue that needs national attention and should not be left to state decision making. And if you live out of the state of Georgia, feel free to contact the Georgia senators as well, because they need to hear from as many people as possible that this needs to be viewed as a nationally significant issue and not a state issue.
Excellent point. Thank you, Chris. I think we have time for another question before I launch our final poll. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to launch our second poll and basically want to know, did you learn something new about the Okefenokee today or our efforts to protect it? And are you willing to take some action to protect it? So please take a few moments to fill out the poll and let us know. And while we do that, we have another question. Will redefinition of waters of the U.S. currently ongoing? Is it currently?
I can attempt to tackle this one. So the WOTUS replacement rule, again, the Waters of the United States replacement rule, was actually deemed illegal by 2 courts and nationally vacated. So it's no longer good law. It's not on the books. Federal government is currently developing a new definition moving forward. As of yet, those court decisions have not retroactively nullified the decision that allowed Twin Pines to move forward in the absence of federal oversight. As Chris mentioned, you know, we are hoping that the federal government reasserts jurisdiction over this project just because it was streamlined under what was deemed an illegal framework, but they have yet to do so. And the current rulemaking that's underway will apply to prospective projects, but it doesn't necessarily implicate those that, again, were approved under the Trump framework.
Thank you, Christian. I'm going to end the poll and share the results with folks. And very exciting that everybody who responded said they did learn something new today. So that's wonderful. And most people have indicated they are willing to take some action to protect the Okefenokee. That makes us very happy. We had another question before I close us out. Could President Biden reverse what Trump did by executive order?
Well, right now there's technically nothing to reverse because the rule was vacated in court, so it's no longer good law. The Biden administration moving forward, however, as I mentioned, is developing this new regulatory definition, which will, restore needed protections to these wetlands and streams throughout the country.
Thank you, Christian. And I think the final question is submitting a comment to dnrgeorgia.gov the avenue to contact Georgia EPD?
Yeah, so I just posted the response to Hunter. It's twinpines.comment@dnr.ga.gov. If you don't want to submit a personalized comment to them, you can easily do so through either the link that Tracy provided to our action alert, or you can go to protectokefenokee.org, where there are also additional opportunities.
And if you weren't able to catch all the links in the chat, again, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with all the links, link to the film, and a link to a recording of this video. I want to thank our panelists so much for being available to answer questions today and for helping us get a better understanding of what's going on with the Okefenokee and how we can protect it. Here's the contact information for everyone here. Christian, myself, Chris, and Charles. And again, I can provide this information for folks in the follow-up email. But if you have any questions, I know Larry asked about donations. This is my email address. Feel free to email me and I can get you the information that you need. Thank you very much for showing up today. And we really appreciate your support. Have a great holiday, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Kitty.
Thanks, Tracy.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I had no idea.
Amazing. Is that Benita?
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, hey, Benita.
I'm gonna put it on the video. I just look awful. Okay.
Yay, I'm so well. I did something at the beginning of the program, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to see anybody's video.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't put myself in. Now, that kind of reminds me of the abortion issue. You know, they chip away little by little by little. Before you know it, you wake up and it's gone.
Yeah.
And same thing with our resources.
Yeah, well, we find that a lot too with projects like this, where it's kind of death by a thousand cuts, where they'll start off with a very small proposal like they did with Twin Pines, and then just increase it over time, right? And so at the end of a decade, the destruction is pretty serious, and it's pretty common. When you look at an isolated project, it might not look like a big deal, but when you look at the cumulative impacts of all the projects together, it makes a huge impact.
Well, I would think at this point, people know that you can't trust big business.
Right. That's a good point.
All they have dollar signs in front of them, They don't care. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for joining.
Next week.
Yeah, see you next. Bye, y'all.
Got to send those letters off.
Send those letters.
Yeah,
and tell your friends.
And write checks.
And write checks. Yeah, it all helps. It's all activism. So
I visited the Okefenokee to canoe with a group called Wilderness Southeast several years ago. Oh. And I think I remember learning from that, or possibly from a film that showed later, that there was an effort, I think it was a timber company, that they wanted to drain the Okefenokee. I think it was in the late 19th century. and they dug a canal, and they came within a few hundred feet of draining the Okefenokee at that time, draining it to a much lower level. And that might be a good addition to this discussion, that even before DuPont, there was another effort specifically intended to take water out of the Okefenokee. And this is a very long story.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, you know, how many swamps and wetlands in Florida, and really on the southern east coast, southeast coast, have been drained for development, for you know, logging, planting pine plantations. You know, it's been going on for centuries, sadly. So, but you know, enough is enough. We can say no.
Well, you'd think they would have learned with the Everglades, but apparently not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mitigating climate change.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I better go. Bye, Tracy.
Bye. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.